Nobody expected the hearing to go this direction. Pam Bondi arrived at the House Judiciary Committee prepared. She had a carefully constructed defense of the Department of Justice. She had her legal team positioned behind her. She had answers ready for the questions she anticipated. She was not ready for Joe Neguse. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable exchanges of the entire hearing. A confrontation that didn't rely on political speeches or partisan attacks. It relied on something far more difficult to deflect: evidence, video footage, numbers, and questions so basic that refusing to answer them became the story itself. Joe Neguse represents Colorado in Congress. Before entering politics, he built a career as a lawyer. He understands how institutions work and how power moves through them. He knows that the most effective way to expose a problem is not to accuse anyone. It is to ask a question so simple and so direct that the refusal to answer it says everything. He is not the kind of lawmaker who asks questions to hear himself speak. He asks to force answers into the public record. When those answers don't come, he stays calm. He repeats the question, and he lets the refusal speak for itself. That approach is exactly what made this confrontation so striking. Bondi walked in as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. She oversees every agency and division operating under the department. Within minutes of Neguse's turn at the microphone, she was unable to answer questions that any informed official should have handled without hesitation. That gap between the position she holds and the answers she gave is what the room couldn't stop thinking about. Neguse began with a video. "Attorney General," he said, "I want to show you a brief clip, about 30 seconds. Then I'll ask you a couple of questions." The footage played inside the hearing room. It came from a police body camera recorded on January 6, 2021. In the clip, a man stands near a group of law enforcement officers, screaming at them. The audio is clear. At one point, he can be heard yelling at officers to kill another person. The room absorbed what it had just watched. Neguse turned toward Bondi. "Attorney General, that man works for you now, correct?" Bondi looked across the room. Her expression stayed composed. "Who was that, Congressman?" "The man in that video," Neguse said. "The one on police body cam footage. The one yelling at officers on January 6th. His name is Jared Weiss." Bondi's response came quietly. "He does work for us." The chamber held that admission for a moment. Nobody moved. Neguse continued, his voice steady. "This is an individual a federal grand jury indicted for 2 felonies and 4 misdemeanors connected to his participation in the January 6th attack. One of those charges was forcibly assaulting, resisting, and interfering with police officers with the intent to commit another felony." He paused. "This is who you choose as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States to hire at the Department of Justice. Someone on video yelling at police officers. Someone a grand jury indicted for assaulting them." Bondi responded, "I believe he was pardoned by President Trump." Neguse nodded slowly. "You're right. Pardoned for exactly what you just watched on that footage." He let the moment sit before moving forward. "And yet you expect hard-working police officers across the country to believe that you take law enforcement seriously." The Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States sat in front of Congress and could not bring herself to say that what that man did was wrong. No response came from Bondi. The silence filled the room. Neguse shifted direction. What came next revealed something that had been quietly happening inside the Department of Justice for months, something most people watching had not been following closely. He asked about the public integrity section of the DOJ's criminal division, known as PIN, a unit created specifically to investigate corruption and abuse of power by public officials, politicians, government employees, anyone who holds public trust and chooses to violate it. "Attorney General, do you know which presidential administration first created PIN?" Bondi didn't answer directly. She pivoted to what she called the weaponization of the department under the previous administration. Neguse interrupted. "I'll reclaim my time." Bondi pushed back. "You don't get to reclaim your time because I don't answer a question to your satisfaction." The chairman intervened. "Madam Attorney General, the time belongs to the gentleman from Colorado." Neguse answered his own question. The administration under which PIN was created was Gerald Ford. It was established after Watergate, after a sitting president used the power of the federal government to obstruct justice and abuse the institutions meant to serve the public. PIN was created so that would never happen again without consequence. so that the officials responsible for enforcing the law could themselves be held accountable when they broke it. Then he delivered the number. When you became Attorney General, there were 35 people working inside that office. He paused. There are now 2. The number settled over the room. 35 people responsible for investigating corruption by public officials, reduced to 2, quietly, without public announcement, without congressional debate, and when asked about it under oath, the Attorney General changed the subject. "You have gutted it," he said. "The unit built after Watergate to ensure accountability now has 2 people working in it, and you have offered no explanation to the public for why." Then Neguse asked a second question, one that Bondi refused to answer entirely. "How many people currently work for the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team inside the Criminal Division?" Bondi tried to redirect again toward Pin. Neguse stopped her. "I've asked you a specific question. How many people work for the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team?" She would not answer. He asked again, "How many?" Still nothing. "You know what the answer is," Neguse said calmly, "and everyone in this room understands why you won't say it out loud." He stated it himself. "You eliminated the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team last year. That is why you won't answer. Because the answer is no one. The team no longer exists." He connected the numbers directly. The President of the United States generated approximately $1.4 billion through cryptocurrency holdings over the past year, and the federal team specifically responsible for investigating financial crimes in that space has been quietly shut down. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. The room processed what that combination of facts meant. When a member of Congress asks how many people work at a federal enforcement unit and the Attorney General refuses to answer, it is not a coincidence. It is not an oversight. It is a deliberate choice. And that choice tells you something about who is being protected and who is not. What made this confrontation different wasn't volume. Neguse never raised his voice. He never accused Bondi of a crime. He asked questions. Simple, direct, factual questions, and each refusal became its own answer. Bondi confirmed that a man documented yelling at police officers on January 6th now works inside the Department of Justice. She offered the presidential pardon as justification. She did not say his conduct was wrong. She could not explain why Pin had been reduced from 35 staff members to 2. The unit created after Watergate to hold powerful officials accountable. Gutted quietly while no one was watching. She did not answer how many people remained at the Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team. She did not explain why it had been eliminated. She did not address its connection to the president's $1.4 billion in personal crypto holdings. Each non-answer landed in the record. Near the end of his time, Neguse addressed the room directly. "These are not trick questions. They are basic questions about how the Department of Justice functions, about who works there, about which enforcement units still exist and which have been quietly eliminated. The unwillingness of this Attorney General to answer them is not a procedural dispute. It is the story." He yielded back the balance of his time. The gavel moved on. But the record Neguse had built stayed in the room. A January 6th defendant employed inside the DOJ. A Watergate-era corruption watchdog reduced to 2 people. A cryptocurrency enforcement team eliminated while the president's personal holdings reached $1.4 billion, and an attorney general who refused to answer straightforward questions about any of it. The hearing continued, but some questions don't end with the session, because sometimes the most revealing moment in a hearing isn't what gets said, it's what doesn't.